Welcome back to the Former Fat Friend podcast. I am joined today by my good friend and incredible guest, Katie Yurow. Katie had gastric sleeve surgery in 2021. She lost 100 pounds, and since then, she has been very open about sharing about regain and how she's working to lose that, and she's used medication. Most recently started on a GLP-1. And I am personally very excited to have Katie on because she is my friend. And I'm just so excited to get to introduce her to all of you and to also learn a little bit more about her story. So Katie, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Good to be here.
So we met in 2022. Mm-hmm. It was through our DMV bariatric meetup group. So I started a meetup group in our area, in the DC area. We put on an event. Katie found it on Instagram, I assume.
And through Haley, actually.
Oh, through Haley. Okay. Mm-hmm. So Haley is the Guackward dietitian. We both worked with Haley, and I want to talk a lot more about that too. But we put on this event. It was a picnic, a little potluck picnic at a park. And Katie was one of the first people to show up to our meetup event. And since then we've just kind of built a friendship. She came to basically every event that we ever did because she loves us and she's great. And we have just become friends through that. And she's had such an incredible journey. And I think, Katie, one of the things we talked about a couple weeks ago is that a lot of times when people are on podcasts, it's when they're kind of newly post-op surgery and things are all going really well. And it's a lot of kind of those early days post-op, what it's like, and then it just ends. And it's so inspiring to hear people changing their lives, but this is a lifelong thing. And what happens in year 2 and 3 and 4 is so different than what happens in that first year post-op. And you've experienced that firsthand. And so I think that's what we really want to focus on today is kind of what is it like in those kind of more long-term years? How do you navigate life once the honeymoon phase is over, once that first year is over and everything is so, so different? So we're going to talk about all of that today. And I'm just so excited to have you here. So I want to give a little bit of backstory for our listeners. Can you kind of tell us a little bit about your history and how you came to the decision to have bariatric surgery?
Mm-hmm. So I was overweight my whole life. I was always the fat friend. All of my friends, especially my best friend, were very thin. My best friend from growing up was not even 100 pounds by the time we graduated high school. She was always the thin one. I was the fat one, but we're still best friends to this day anyway. And I think I was always up and down, roller coastering, trying everything just like everybody else, right? And I got to a point after COVID, actually, where I just kind of blew up and didn't care. I had been off of work for 3 months, had to go back to work. It was incredibly stressful. I do hair, so I work in very close contact with people. There wasn't a lot of guidance. I was very nervous about COVID. My dad was a high risk patient, so I was very active about where I was going and what I was doing, and very I will not risk. So going back to do hair, standing right in front of people was scary, and it caused a lot of stress. And I think I just delved into food more than I ever had before. And I got up to about 250 pounds. And my blood work had always been fine. My doctors were like, yeah, lose weight, you'll be fine. But I never had high cholesterol, never had to really worry about the lab aspect of it until I went to my doctor, and my labs indicated that I was pre-diabetic, and their response was, well, just eat low carb and exercise. And I said, well, I've been doing that my whole life. So I lose it and gain it. And unless I starve myself, I'm not losing weight, because that's really all that ever worked. So I was working with a girl whose cousin had VSG. I had never heard of it. I thought you only got bypass and you had to be 700 pounds. Mm-hmm. She was around my age, and I was just very inspired by her pictures. She showed me a before picture and after picture, and I was like, well, why am I not doing this? This is crazy. So I had mentioned something to my therapist, and she said, that is definitely an option, but I don't think you're ready. And I said, I don't think you know what you're talking about, because I am literally the most ready I've ever been in my life. So behind her back, I contacted the doctors at GBMC up in Baltimore, and I had a consult with Dr. Bello. He's now in Florida. He's amazing. And he said, you absolutely can get it. Let's, do what you need to do for your insurance to cover it, go through the process, the education, all that stuff. So I was determined. And throughout the whole thing, my therapist was like, this is a terrible idea. You're not ready. You're not ready. You haven't tackled your food addiction. This is not going to change your life like you think it is, but we can talk about that. And I will sign off as your therapist when I think you're ready. She never thought I was ready. I was like, just sign it. I don't care. Like, I'm doing this no matter what. And if you don't sign off on it, I will find somebody who will. I was just desperate.
Did she give an indication of like what she thought you needed to do to be ready and you didn't want to do it? Or was it just a time thing?
She had said to me, over the years, you are an addict. You're a food addict. And if it's not food, it's something else. You haven't really emotionally prepared yourself for something this big. You don't like emotions. You shy away from them. You will do anything to have them. And this is going to be a bigger deal than you think it is. And I said, well, no, I'll just eat less and then all my problems will be solved. I don't know what you're talking about.
Obviously very simple.
Obviously, just shrink my stomach and then everything in the world will be right. And she was incredibly right about me not being emotionally ready. But, eventually after about 6 months, she did sign off on it and said, we will monitor you very closely. I have your history, blah, blah, blah. Like, we'll do it together.
So what did you do in those 6 months that led up to her signing off on it?
Just our therapy sessions.
Okay.
She had said that she really wanted me to do EMDR therapy. I had already done that in the past. It was very emotional. It was very heavy. It did make a huge difference in my life at the time.
What is EMDR?
You're going to make me say the scientific name for it, but it's basically has something to do with using both sides of your brain to access emotions and feelings that you kind of just don't consciously think of. And they use it through either sight, hearing, or touch.
Okay, got it.
So you work with an EMDR specialist, and that was in a lot of ways life-changing, but it does access a very deep-rooted part of yourself that you don't really realize is there. And it helps you in your life, to make uncomfortable decisions or figure out why you have anxiety about certain things and, et cetera. So I had done that already. She suggested I do it. And I said, absolutely not. I'm not doing that again. That was very emotional. It was very heavy. It actually was one of the catalysts that led to my divorce from my first husband. And I just I wasn't doing it again. So she just, week by week until leading up to the surgery, she was like, how are you going to change your lifestyle? How is this going to affect you? Blah, blah, blah. And I think I just told her what I wanted her to hear for like her to sign off of it. Cause I really was just,
you just wanted
ready.
It done. Yeah.
So, I did the pre-op diet, which was 2 weeks of low carb and then 2 days leading up of liquids only.
Okay.
I lost no weight. I did it to a T. And I said, see, this is why I need surgery, because I've been really good and it's not working. So I actually did during the liquid diet for 2 days, I had dropped like 9 pounds. Like, it was crazy. And I said, see, if I starve myself, it works, but I can't live that way. So on June 2nd, 2021, I had surgery. The surgery went well. I did have a very rough recovery pain-wise. You're supposed to walk every hour or whatever. And I would refuse because it felt like the way I could describe it was running a marathon after a full Thanksgiving dinner, like the cramping, the gas, the bloating. And I was just like, oh my God, I had to force myself up just to walk around my kitchen island at the time.
Oh, wow.
And with the help of my boyfriend at the time, but now husband, he was like a drill sergeant. He was like, you will not get blood clots. I'm not letting you do this. Like, you are absolutely going to do this. You can do it. And after about a week and a half, 2 weeks, I was comfortable enough to go back to work.
Okay. Yeah, I guess that's a little harder because you're on your feet all day at work. So that's impressive that you went back that quickly.
I should not have. I did. But every client was like, how are you feeling? You look awful. And I was like, I feel awful. Thank you. And sweating, and like shaking. It was it was awful. But once I kind of got back into the swing of things, it was fine. I think the mental toll that it took was infinitely worse than any of the physical.
Was there a moment after surgery where you thought, oh, shoot, my therapist was right?
Yes and no. I think after surgery, I did have a little buyer's remorse. I just thought, this isn't worth it. It just was really, really painful. I tell people now when they're getting surgery, don't watch TV when you're recovering, because every single commercial is food. Like every single commercial, everything around you, you're going to notice has to do with food, drinking, social settings, everything. And that was a bummer. I really didn't think too much, but I don't know what I expected, because every time I would ask anyone in the community or whoever, what is it like? What's it like to not be hungry? They said, well, it's different for everyone. That was like the universal answer. And that does not sit well with me. I need answers right now.
Yeah.
I need to know what to expect. This is freaking me out. So I thought, yeah, everyone's different, but mine's like really different. People aren't having this much pain and whatever, like something must be wrong. I called my, surgery center multiple times. Like, I don't even think I can get out of bed. This is crazy. And they're like, you have to just try. And yeah, after surgery, I was like, this wasn't worth it. Like, it just wasn't. And then as time went on and, I was able to do more things comfortably and, take walks and all that stuff. It definitely was the right decision, but it did take me a long time to get there. Even though I was struggling emotionally and mentally, I knew it was the right move.
Yeah. So you thought going into surgery, you just needed to have surgery and everything would be better in life. And you did lose a lot of weight in that first year. Was everything better in life?
It was not better. I mean, physically, one of the big reasons I did decide to have surgery is because I was physically uncomfortable. Sitting in a car for any period of time was uncomfortable. The seatbelt was uncomfortable. Walking up the stairs and my knee hurting. And that's not something I had dealt with a ton growing up, even though I was overweight. It didn't really hit that hard until I got into my 30s. And, like my breast size was really big. They were never going down. Everyone said, oh, just lose weight. They'll go down. Like, you'll be fine. It was hard to sleep, like comfortably. I ended up getting a little bit of sleep apnea, snoring, that kind of thing. And I just was like, I just need to be more comfortable. I just want to be more comfortable physically. And I was like, being in the middle seat in the plane with the, you don't need a seatbelt extender, all that stuff. It is physically infinitely better. But I had a very, very hard time mentally and emotionally losing food as comfort and a coping mechanism.
Did you know the extent to which you had this food addiction or reliance on food as a coping mechanism before you had surgery?
No, not even close. Like, I knew I had addiction issues. I always thought, like, whatever, I can stop, do whatever. My therapist, like, believes in me and I'm fine. I'm fine. It was always, I'm fine. I can do it on my own. Whatever comes up, I'll handle it. And what happened was, the food turned into anything else. Literally, shopping was a big one, especially newly post-op when you're just like dropping weight. All your clothes don't fit. And I was like, well, it's not really a shopping addiction because I need these clothes.
The way we justify things.
Oh my God, I would justify like anything. And it just, kind of got out of hand. And then I stopped losing the weight and I was like, well, I don't really need more clothes anymore. And then, newly post-op, I'm thinking to myself, well, I'm not hitting my calorie goal. So let me take a weed gummy before bed and then I'll be hungry. So I can like eat a protein bar and get my protein in, which became a huge habit of mine. Like, now I can't sleep without my wheat gummies. So obviously I need it. I'm not addicted to it, like whatever, and then that kind of like morphed into like legit anything. So what my therapist tells me is that I'm a whack-a-mole addict, which is hard because it's not like, oh, you're an alcoholic, go to AA, or, you're on drugs, go to NA or whatever. This was a little more complicated. I would literally grasp at anything I could, including drugs, gambling, shopping, sex. It didn't matter. I was going to use all of that to cope with any stressful, uncomfortable situation because I didn't have food. And, the ones that had less calories were the ones I kind of like flocked to the most. And it just, it really did spiral into something that I was incredibly ashamed of and felt guilty about. And I felt like I didn't know what else to do. So that's when I kind of reached out to other types of therapies and stuff to get into that.
Yeah, I know. I think it's something we all hear about going into bariatric surgery. You hear about transfer addiction, but I don't think it's given as much weight as we should. No pun intended. Because there are so many ways that we can try to fill those holes in our lives. And I think especially like, I don't think that I had any sort of food addiction nearly to the extent that you were dealing with. But when that's taken away, it was almost a sense of like, well, what do I do now?
Yep.
Like, what do I spend my mental energy on? And for me, like, yeah, shopping became like a huge, like,
I think that's all of us.
yeah. Well, I need clothes.
So fun.
Like, yeah.
It's like a non-scale victory too, almost, if you
Totally,
think about it. Like, oh, I
yeah.
fit into this size, I fit into that size, and everything's falling off of me, and it's like, it's celebrated, you know, it's great. You don't really think of it in terms of trying to fill a need or fill a hole. You think this is a necessity.
Yeah, but then it gets to a point where you're like, okay, my bank account is very low, and that's a concern.
Yeah.
So what was that point for you where you started to realize like, okay, these new behaviors are becoming a problem, and they're an attempt to fill that void of food?
Recently, like probably 6 weeks before I got married, I
wow.
was going from thing to thing, and still working with my therapist, and this whole time dealing with emotional baggage, you could say, from childhood that I wasn't really ready to access, and just kind of anything I could to numb any sort of stress or anxiety about anything really. And I'm on medication for that. And so it was like, it took a lot. So about 5 weeks before I got married, my grandmother passed away, and I mean, she lived to be almost 95, but she was like the one person in my family that I was probably the closest with. You know, she always had my back. Growing up, I was always like the bad child. I got in trouble a lot. My brother was like the golden child, you know, like the favorite, even though they'll deny till forever. So I was dealing with a lot of things that were triggering me, and I didn't really understand why. And it kind of all goes back to subconscious stuff from childhood, essentially. And a lot of my behaviors were self-sabotaging, obviously. And I was like on the brink of losing every good thing in my life and blowing up, you know, my marriage, my weight loss, like all that stuff. And I think, like, I don't even know what the aha moment was. I can't tell you if it was one thing or not, but something clicked, and I just thought, I need to be better. I need to do better. This is what I've always done. And I did not have the surgery to continue doing what I've always done. And it did take close to 3 years to realize that. And once that light bulb went off, there was no stopping me. I'm also like kind of impulsive. So I was like, I got to do something about this right now. So a client of mine who is actually in recovery, I'm very close with her. She, you know, the wedding's coming up. How are you doing? And I don't know. I just broke down, and I was like, I'm like on the verge of blowing up my marriage. Like, I don't know what to do. I'm freaking out. Everything is very overwhelming. I feel like I'm barely treading water. You know, I'm like, I mean, I'm not having a full blown affair, but I could, you know, like there were people in my past coming back up, probably because I was getting married, and they're like, oh, you're happy. You should talk to me again.
Yeah.
It's very hard to not, you know, go that path when that's the path you know. So she had mentioned to me, you should listen to this podcast. There's a woman on there who's actually a sex and love addict. And she's like, I'm not saying that's what you need, but it was really insightful. And it might stop you from like doing something really stupid. So I listened to this podcast, and it was this author who was a guest on someone else's podcast. Her name is Lacey Bentley. She deals with women with sex and love addiction with a concentration in inner child trauma and inner child healing. So I knew it was like a buzzword from my other therapist. Like, your inner child is whatever. And I'm like, yeah, she's she'll be fine. Like, she'll be fine. It's fine.
She'll get over
we
it.
don't need to talk about her.
She's pushed way down.
Right. Like, she doesn't even exist anymore. Yeah. We're fine. So I listened to this podcast, and I think I said, I just was like, I'm going to reach out to this woman. Like, she has an email address. She has a website. Let me just see what she has to say. And this was right before my wedding, and which I think if anyone's gotten married, especially now, this is my second wedding. It's very stressful. I was very nervous. My first wedding was awful, and my marriage was even worse. And I was very nervous that this was going to be a repeat. And I couldn't do that again. So I reached out to Lacey and I said, here's my situation. I don't know if you can help me, but I'm desperate. Like, I'm coming to like a desperate time again. And I need to be a better person. I don't know why I behave this way. I don't want to be this way anymore. I'm going to hurt people that I'm very close with in my life, and I can't allow that to happen, but I don't know what else to do. So she took me on as a client and it was a 6-month, or I'm at the tail end of it, but it's a 6-month program. And she 2 days a week, once one-on-one with me and her, and once with my husband, so that he could kind of see what goes on in the head of an addict and someone with anxiety, because he doesn't have that. He's a saint. I mean, my Maddie is like,
he is
an angel, like sent from the heavens. I don't know what I did to deserve him, but like, I love him so much, and he is like legit the best person in the world. So I wanted to match that for him. I thought he deserved better than me. And I think in the past I would have completely self-sabotaged and just ended the relationship because I didn't want, like, it was just like, no, this is too good to be true.
Yeah.
It's more comfortable to end this than see what happens and hurt him. So she has been a huge help. I've been doing her therapy along with my original therapist in conjunction of each other. So it's a lot of therapy. It's exhausting, but it has completely changed my life, my mentality, the way I go about my life, the decisions that I make. And honestly, it has saved me from myself, I think. And it's hard. Obviously, you have to talk about things that are uncomfortable. And I think I don't know what Lisa even says, like, you have to get comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And, I'm at the tail end of that very intensive therapy, and it was one of the best decisions that I ever made.
Yeah. Yeah, that is, I think your story will resonate with people because, like I said, we often hear about transfer addiction, but we don't give that much credit to it. And I think the way you've described it, it's like, it's not just that you take this food addiction and turn it into, gambling or alcohol or whatever, but like, it really does have significant impacts on your life. And like, for you, it was like, this might implode everything that matters to me. And so it really matters that we talk about these things. Is the food addiction, has that come back again now that you're further post-op and able to eat more? And so I guess what I'm asking is, those first couple months post-op, you literally can't eat anything. So you have to find something else to fill that void. But you and I both know as you get further out, you can actually eat quite a bit more. Has that food addiction come back up, or has that still been suppressed by the surgery? So
yes and no. Obviously, I can't eat the volume that I could eat before, but I was finding myself, and side note, I track everything still. Like, when I don't track, it's like it didn't happen, and I know that that's terrible. So I still track everything in a food log.
Okay.
I don't know why I do it. It's not that it makes me feel better or worse. It's just a habit at this point. I like to see where my protein is. I like to see where my calories are. I don't let it dictate my eating, but it is just kind of a data point at this time. So I, still eat under calorie wise, but I was leaning more towards like my grilled cheeses, my macaroni and cheese, my pizza, like the comfort foods, like, and I would say like, I want a specific thing and I can't eat anything else or it won't satisfy that craving. And it's really not, I wasn't craving grilled cheese. I was craving something to fill the hole.
Right.
And that's just an easy go-to. So it's hard to say, like, yes, there was still the food addiction aspect, but no, I could not binge. Like,
Yeah.
it just, you can't. It's
Yeah.
not a thing. But the food noise was there for sure.
Yeah. So I want to talk a little bit about how you experienced a little bit of regain, which is very, very normal post-bariatric surgery. And you've also taken steps to address that. So I do want to talk a little bit about that. But can you tell us when you started to experience regain and what that was like?
I want to say it was maybe like a year and a half post-op. I was still seeing Haley, my dietitian. I started seeing her at 6 months post-op, and I still to this day see her once a month. Like, she's amazing. I don't know what it was. It just, something happened, and I don't know if it was hormonal, because I do have funky hormones, which are being addressed also by my doctor, thank God, because that was like, whew. I don't know if it was hormonal. I don't know if I just was drinking more. I don't know if the stress, because I was still walking all the time. I had started at 45. I was really moving my body. I was like in this great kind of rhythm. And just over time, it just kept creeping up and up. And I, said to Haley, I was like, I don't know what's going on. Like, look at my food logs. Like, something is up. Like, what am I doing? And, we tried to adjust how much protein I was eating in the morning. It's something like, it just wasn't happening. And there were periods of times where it would stall and I wasn't gaining. And then there were periods of time where I would just shoot up. And she and I had talked about maybe going on GLP-1 medication. She said, just talk to your surgeon and see what they say. Well, of course, my insurance wouldn't cover it. So my surgery center suggested phentermine. And I got on that for, it was probably almost a year. I lost initially maybe like 7 pounds and then nothing after that. Like it just stopped, and I was taking it and it just was not doing anything. I don't know.
Felt like no effect of it?
No, at first, when I first started it, that first week, I actually texted Haley and I was like, am I supposed to feel like I'm on Coke? Because I literally feel like I just did an entire bag of Coke. What the hell is going on? And she was like, you'll get used to it. It's fine. Yeah. Is your heart rate okay? And I was like, no, I feel like crazy. She was like, oh, that's normal. I'm like, really? It's a feel normal.
Intense medication.
Oh my God. So yeah, that first week, I think I probably lost some water weight, and I wasn't as hungry, but over time, it really didn't do anything. So a coworker of mine went on compound GLP-1, and I had talked to Carolyn about it and stuff, because I was saying how annoyed I was that my insurance wouldn't cover it and I couldn't get it anywhere, blah, blah, blah. So a coworker of mine went on a compounded GLP-1. He went through LifeMD, a virtual company that, there's so many of them. And they were able to get me compounded Wegovy.
Okay.
And I started that back in August.
Okay. And how has that been?
So that's been really, really good. I started out with like the lowest dose, and funny story, I started it the night before I was going to an outdoor music festival for 4 days. We had rented an RV, and I seriously accidentally took a double dose of my first injection.
Oh, because compounded, you have to measure it out yourself.
Yes, you have to measure it out yourself. And I did it the night before thinking this will be so great. I won't have to worry about it, Keep talking. Okay. I won't have to worry about it while I'm gone. This will be amazing. I'm going to get 1 million steps in because I'm going to this music festival. And I ended up getting incredibly sick. I had a migraine for days. When I tell you I've never experienced the ick from food before in my life, I was freaking out. I actually called or texted Haley and I said, am I going to die? Like, I actually feel like something is wrong. Like, this can't be right. And she said, you doubled your dose? And I said, well, I don't know. It's just what the directions said. Well, they had sent me my first and second dose.
Oh.
Accidentally took the second dose.
Okay.
Whatever. It was awful. And I was like, this was the biggest mistake of my life. I'm never going to survive this. After a couple of days, it got better. But she even said, like, I need you to eat. Like,
Yeah.
you're dehydrated, you're out in the sun, like try to eat at least 1,000 calories. And at that point I was like, if I was getting 200 calories, that was a lot, because
Oh my
I
gosh.
couldn't even look at food without wanting to vomit.
Oh, that's awful.
So from then on, I took my correct dose. I never made that mistake again. And I still double check, like, and triple check.
Yeah.
And I will say I have lost since then about 12 pounds.
That's awesome.
Out of the 20 to 25 that I need to lose. I've been sitting at the same weight for a while now, which is fine. I'm perfectly fine with it as long as I don't gain. And I'm now within the high end of the range that my doctor wants me to be in.
That's amazing.
Thank you. He doesn't want me to go back down to my lowest weight. That's unsustainable. And actually now looking back at pictures of myself, I'm like,
Yeah.
maybe not.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's been really good. But I have to say the biggest, I don't know, blessing with it has been just the absolute elimination of food noise. And like I said to you a couple weeks ago, like, I think it's been amazing in helping in my addiction recovery. It has given me the space and time to slow my thoughts down and slow decisions and choices down so that I can actually be mindful of the choices I'm making. It has just really gotten me to a place of peace, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
And now moving forward, this is something I've been working with my therapist on, is protecting my peace. And my life going forward is now, if it does not protect my peace, if it causes me anxiety, if it causes me distress, which will then lead me to bad behaviors, which then leads me to guilt and shame. And it's this endless freaking cycle.
Yeah.
You know, it's not for me. And I have to put up my boundaries. It's sometimes that's going to be hard for people. It's definitely hard for me, but at this point in my life, and I really do think with the help of the GLP-1, it's my number one priority. And, you know, the Wegovy has definitely helped with my brain. I don't know. It's like so hard to explain.
Yeah.
And now I'm very, very, I don't know, deliberate about my life choices and work choices, who I'm seeing, my social time, who I'm giving my energy to. And it has made such a difference that, you know, I haven't really felt much anxiety or depression or the need to cope with substances that are not good for me. That is in no way, shape, or form mean that I am sober. I don't want anyone to think that I am like in recovery, sober, whatever. But I will say the GLP-1 has slowed me down enough to actively make decisions around that kind of stuff, where I can say to myself, am I going to regret this? Why do I want to drink or do drugs or go shopping? It just makes me take a step back and really say, like, is this something that I need? Is this something I'm going to regret? Really, really think through it first before you act. So if I have girlfriends that want to go out to a cocktail bar and have like a nice cocktail, I will go and I will really weigh out the pros and cons. I will sit there with myself, with my husband, and say, like, I'm only going to have one. I just want to taste it. I'm a sucker for an espresso martini. I probably, because of surgery and the medication, I'm pretty limited to one. Otherwise, you know, like the shoulder cramps happen and I get sick and whatever. But I really do think the GLP-1 has helped me in more ways than just weight loss. It's bigger than that. And I can't wait for them to, the powers that be, to discover all the other, you know, benefits from it.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible. I think there's a couple things that you said that really stand out to me. One, well, in general, I think what you've said tells me how complex of a disease obesity is. The fact that you were tracking all of your food and still experiencing regain, you're like the poster child for everything you're supposed to be doing right. And I think sometimes, like, you know, it's easy to chalk it up to like it's your fault when you're not, when you don't know. So if I were to start, I don't track my food. If I were to start gaining weight, my instant assumption is it's something I'm doing wrong. It's my fault. But you had the data to say, like, this is exactly what I'm eating every single day. I'm not doing anything wrong. And so I think that's really important for people to hear, is like, this is not always about you, and surgery kind of gets you that initial weight loss. It only gets you so far, but obesity is a really complex disease. GLP-1s are so fascinating to me for so many reasons, but I think that they add to that idea that obesity is this complex disease because it's acting on gut hormones that affect your brain in a way that surgery never could. And there are some clinical trials happening for testing GLP-1s for addiction. I think it was smoking cessation was the one that I saw. And it's just so fascinating to me that like we might find similar biological pathways between obesity and things like alcoholism and addictive behaviors. And there may be like a really great solution for that, which is just incredible. It's just such an incredible place to be. And it's so cool that you've had this experience of seeing what life is like when you have the space to actually process and not feel that what I imagine is sort of like impulse to go to these certain behaviors because you don't have the mental space to actually deal with it. Mm-hmm. And it's just super cool.
Yeah. It's interesting. Like, you know, going through therapy and all that stuff, they talk about food addiction and healing your relationship with food. And, you know, I'm very into like the whole head work aspect of it and stuff, but I feel like it needs to go further than head work. I knew when I was making these poor life choices and decisions, it wasn't good. And in hindsight, I could say, oh, well, that's because something triggered my inner child or whatever. But it was always after the fact.
Right.
They always teach you, you know, like you heal your relationship with food, heal your relationship with your head, but they don't go into the deeper stuff with yourself, your relationship with your heart, your relationship with yourself, you know, your subconscious, your inner child, whatever you want to call it. It sounds kind of nutty, like, and like whatever, but it really is a thing. And without that GLP-1 slowing my brain down to really absorb this type of therapy and absorb what was happening to me in the moment, like I wouldn't be here. Like I would definitely be doing the same crap I was doing. I'd probably be getting a divorce. I'd probably be in the gutter. Like I'd be doing way too many drugs, drinking way too much alcohol. And then at the end of the day, I'd be like, oh, right, that was stupid. Why did I do that? You know, like in hindsight, you can see these things and you know, but you don't really feel it in the moment.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important. I would always say to my therapist, like, well, how do I in the moment figure this out? It's very easy to talk to you about this after the fact.
Yeah.
But in the moment, I can't see it, you know? And the GLP-1, I think, is that answer. At least for me. I can't say that about everybody, but for me, it has helped me be in the moment, figure out where to go.
Yeah, I think that's so fascinating. And you're right. It's easy to look back and sort of do like a postmortem on your behavior and say like, oh, well, I could have done this differently. But when you're faced with that in the moment and you have to make that choice, it's not, you're not always thinking through all your therapy tools. Like,
no, it's a subconscious thing.
It's totally subconscious.
And that's normal. You know, most people are not accessing their inner child in every decision that they make. You know, it's an active practice. You have to do it and you have to be willing to do it. And, you know, it's scary. It's kind of like, I grew up not, you know, emotions were bad. Like I was in trouble for having big feelings and they were never talked about. So now almost 40 years old, it's very hard to like find new ways to have emotions that are healthy and embrace that. And anything you can do to help is fine. It doesn't matter what it is. Just get the help. Like ask for the help. It doesn't matter whether it's from a podcast or a therapist or even just like a friend. Like none of this would be possible. I wouldn't be as happy in the place that I am in had I not asked for the help. And I think as bariatric patients, we think like, oh yeah, I did. I had surgery. It's great. But it goes beyond surgery.
It does. And it's interesting because I think all of us, to get to the point of having bariatric surgery, you know, you need to ask for help, right? You have to ask for help to get surgery. But yet somehow we feel like when things don't go well for us post-surgery, that it's totally on us to figure it out. And we're doing something wrong. you look at everybody else and you're like, they've all figured it out. They're doing it right. They're successful. If things aren't working for me, it's my fault. And I think what I'm learning and what you're a walking testament of is that that's just not true. And this is something that you'll need to do for the rest of your life, and everyone will need to do for the rest of their life, is recognize when things aren't going well, ask for help. It doesn't necessarily need to be your bariatric surgeon again. It might be a therapist. It might be a dietitian. It might be a personal trainer. It could be any sort of combination of things. But I think it's so funny to me that we are the people who knew enough to ask for help, and yet we're also the ones who are so hesitant to reach out and ask for help again.
Well, because I think after the surgery, you think that's it. Like you're like, oh, everything is great. Everything is going to be solved for me. And then you almost feel like a failure.
Totally.
After the surgery, because you're like, wait, like I did this huge gesture for myself and I still can't figure it out. Like, obviously I failed. And I think that's really hard as bariatric patients because we've felt like we failed our whole lives. And then we did this huge thing and it's still not working. Like, that's not everybody, obviously, but like a lot of people, I think it does. And, you know, it is very, very hard to ask for help after the fact. You know what I mean? And you feel this guilt and shame. I mean, and I only gained 25, 30 pounds. I can't imagine people who regain all their weight, and like this guilt and shame. It's just a terrible cycle that you need to get out of. And it's very, very hard to do. And I mean, I applaud anyone who does anything for themselves after surgery, even. But there's just so much more that can be done. And I think, you know, transfer addiction is a huge part of that. And I think there's a lot of guilt and shame that goes along with that, not just being obese, but now I have 10 other issues that I need to address. So it's very hard. And anyone who says this is the easy way out can kick rocks, because it's just not true.
So knowing what you know now, almost 4 years later, would you still have gastric sleeve surgery?
That's like a really hard question. They didn't have GLP-1s when I had surgery. That was like not a thing. And I want to say I probably would have tried that first, if the option was there, and then see what happens. But because that wasn't an option, obviously surgery was the way to go. And it was the catalyst to everything that snowballed after that and got me to where I am today. So sure, I would have it again. But I don't think it is the answer to all my problems. I mean, it definitely, you know, spawned things, but I don't think it was my answer.
Do you think if you had done the therapy work that you've done recently combined with something like a GLP-1 that you could have found the same level of success that you found without having had the surgery?
Probably over time, and with a willingness to be open to working on myself and healing my relationship with myself. But it's just hard to say, you know, to like live in the past or whatever. It's just not that easy of an answer. It's so, like, my healing journey has been so complex and nuanced and full of mistakes and terrible decisions and good decisions and other people influencing, you know, my decisions. So that's a really hard thing to say. It's hard.
Yeah, it is tough. I often wonder this too. Like, I spent 35 years being obese and trying everything and nothing worked. And then this did, and I don't know. And like, I'm so different. I'm such a different person now. I think about food so differently. I approach how I eat and how I move so differently. And I'm like, if I were this person before, would I have needed the surgery, or do I still really rely on that restriction that I have to kind of carry me through? And I don't know.
It's hard to say. It's like, you don't know because you didn't. You know what I mean? Like, before surgery, had I had all of the education and all of the things, but also it goes back to your point of saying, like, sometimes you can do everything right and it doesn't work, you know? Like, it's just, things happen. This is a complex disease. So who knows? But
so if you had a friend who was struggling with obesity and exploring treatment, what would you recommend to them?
Do you, boo-boo? I don't know. Like, I would just be like, really do your research, talk to as many people as you can, get a great therapist. ideally a bariatric therapist, and, rally as much support as you can before you make a decision. But to be honest with you, like, nothing could have prepared me for surgery. I mean, it was so not what I thought it was going to be, and I think a lot of people have these expectations and they just don't manifest that way. So I would just say, you have a journey to go on. It's your journey. It's nobody else's. If you are gung-ho about this, do it. Deal with the consequences after, because no one could tell me anything. I don't know about you. Like, anyone could say, like, well, are you sure? I'd be like, you don't know what you're talking about. I know what I'm talking about.
I didn't tell anyone because I didn't want anyone else's opinion, because I was so set on it. I was like, I don't need to know what anyone else thinks. This is what I'm doing, and it's the right thing. And it was the right thing for me. But I think we're in such an interesting time in the world with science and the treatment of obesity. And I really do think GLP-1s are incredible. I mean, hearing stories like yours are just such a testament to how powerful these medications are. My mom has been on a GLP-1 and she has struggled with her weight has yo-yoed her whole life and as long as I've known her. And I've never seen her be so successful as she is with this GLP-1. And it's just, you like see these over and over again. And I'm like, is this the future? Is bariatric surgery still needed? Should we be encouraging people to do GLP-1s instead? Should we be encouraging them to do both? Should a bariatric surgery program automatically have GLP-1s as part of follow-up care? I think there's so many questions for me, and we're not experts, so we don't know the answer, but it's an interesting thing to think about.
It's absolutely, it's wild out there. I don't know, like, it just, the commercials and stuff, it's everywhere. I mean, celebrities, everything. And, there's always going to be a positive side and a negative side, right? Like, people can go too far with it, and then they get the criticism and the negativity and it's easy to take an injection and not do anything. But if you've struggled your whole life and you are so desperate for anything, try it. Like, who cares? If it works, great. If it doesn't, you get off of it. Like, why not try it and get all the help that you can get before making any other decision? Like, then just go from there. Like, it never hurts to try and to talk to somebody who can help you. I wish it was more accessible, to be honest.
That's the biggest problem.
It's a pain. And I think people give up, like, because no one wants to deal with their insurance. No one wants to deal with that. And they don't make it easy. And I'm really, really hoping that at least in the bariatric community, it's a little more accessible. At least. Yeah.
I mean, I think bariatric surgery also suffers from a lack of accessibility. I think insurance, I obviously couldn't get mine covered through my insurance. There's this like tendency to want you to get sicker before they will step in and do anything. And that's a big problem. But medications there's a huge barrier to accessibility. And there's also it's going to exacerbate economic disparities too, because there's the people who can afford the compounded medication, they can afford to pay out of pocket, and there's those who can't. And like, we see so many health disparities related to income disparity, and that's just going to exacerbate it even further. So we really need insurance to just get on board. Okay?
Right. Well, it's such a sad state when, I'm talking to my dad about this, because I actually, like, for a second was like, well, maybe they've been so gung-ho about me losing weight, maybe they'll pay for it. Like, I'm very fortunate to have parents who are, live comfortably and stuff. But the last thing I need to do, especially for my inner child, is ask them for money for this.
Right.
And my dad just was like, well, just get diabetes and they'll cover it. And I'm like, that is not the answer.
Yeah. That can't be the way to go.
Nope, not it. Thanks. I'll try a different route. But that is sad that was what I would have had to do to get my insurance to cover a non-compounded medication.
Yeah, it is sad. I'm hopeful that things will change. I mean, there's a reason you hear about these so much, because they actually work. And I don't think that we've really had anything in the history of medicine that has worked to treat obesity the way that these medications do. And insurance is always the last to get on board. And hopefully they catch up soon, because these are really, truly life-changing medications for people. I think you're walking proof of that.
I mean, so far so good.
Yeah. Is your plan to stay on it indefinitely?
Yeah. I mean, I'm not even like halfway up my max dose. Okay. On compounded, I'm on 40 units, but like it goes up to the 12, I think. So, I'm not even there yet. And it has helped tremendously. And like I said, even if I don't lose any more weight, like mentally, it has just really, really been so beneficial. And I'm really grateful.
Yeah. And I would imagine too, the taking away, even if you don't lose anymore, not gaining takes away that stress of feeling like, what is going on? What am I doing wrong? How do I fix this? Just having that mental weight lifted is invaluable.
Life and recovery and trying to work on yourself is hard enough. Not having to worry about physical weight is freeing. I mean, really, really freeing.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Katie, this has been such a great conversation. Thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing with us and being so vulnerable and sharing the good and the bad that comes with life post bariatric surgery and post weight loss. I think this has been a very real and honest conversation, and I think people will learn a lot from it, and I hope that they do. And so thank you.
Thank you for having me. I really was so nervous, but this was so much easier. And honestly, like if nothing else, I hope this inspires even one person to get the mental help that they need, or to open a conversation about addiction or transfer addiction, whatever it is. Just don't be afraid to do that. And I need to be better with my social media about being open, and maybe after this that'll happen.
Yeah. So if people want to find you on social media, where can they do that?
So my VSG account is LadyKatie_VSG. I also do hair. And if they want to find me, it's LadyKatie_hair.
Awesome. And I will put links to both of those accounts in our show notes. Thank you so much again for joining us. I hope you enjoyed this conversation, and we will see you next week. Oh, I forgot. You can find us on social media too. We are at Former Fat Friend Pod on Instagram and TikTok. And you can find me at Maintaining Casey on Instagram and TikTok. And we will see you next time. Bye.
Bye.